That was really short, though.
Hello.
So, first of all, I'm a great believer in the pleasure of procrastination. To put things off as long as possible. You know, I snooze in the morning, I hit the snooze button many times, and I put things off as long as I can, including deciding what I was going to talk about today. I mean, JP and his crew, they've been trying to get my lecture in for a long time, obviously, to prepare and make it all nice. And I didn't really knew what I was going to talk about before I came here. And yesterday, I woke up in the morning, and I was like, I'm going to talk about how we cut our work time down at Faviken from like 80 hours a week to 45. And then what happened? I mean, my friendly neighbor from Norway, Espen, he spoke about exactly the same thing. So then I discarded that idea. And I thought I was going to do something completely different, and then I kind of realized that I'm going to talk a little bit about that anyway, because it's really important, and it's also something that we've come about doing very differently than he did. And to me, it's not perhaps as much about cutting down the work time or distributing work time. It's more about the importance of time off, which is the angle that we've taken, and feeling that you're at liberty to have time off. So, this might take a little bit longer than 11 minutes and 25 seconds that I have left. A few years ago, I watched a film called Jiro Dreams of Sushi, as I'm sure that many of you guys have done as well. And I mean, it's an amazing film, and for those who haven't seen it, it's about Japanese sushi chefs and his restaurant in Tokyo. And I think it's a film that everyone should see, because it says so much about the mind of a very ambitious chef and how things really work. In a slightly weird and Japanese and over-exaggerated way, perhaps, but still, it says a lot. And it's a really beautiful film. And the sad thing for me was that my lasting impression after having seen this film was that I had one thought in my mind. And a not very pleasant thought either. And that thought was that I do not want to become Jiro. Absolutely not. And I felt that I was really kind of going down that route, you know, with the format of restaurant that I've chosen, the way we work, you know, building a small restaurant that's highly, highly associated with the person. And that sort of obsession that he shows as well, I could see that with myself. And it was a real sort of wake-up call for me. And for several reasons. Like, one is that, I mean, I don't want to deny myself, and I felt that then at least, and I feel it even stronger now, that I didn't want to deny myself what most people would refer to as a normal life. Perhaps the ability to spend time with your family, to have vacation, to do things that are not work-related, to think about things that are not work-related, and so on. And I also felt that, you know, even though for Jiro, who is a person who dedicated himself to one singular task, you know, to perfecting the craft of his sushi, it didn't really work for me, because I run a creative restaurant where we want to innovate. We don't just want to perfect craft, that's part of it, but we also really want to make new things, you know. And that was also one of the kind of reasons why I felt that this direction was so wrong for me. And if you think about what creativity is, you know, it sometimes feels like it's magic, like it's sorcery, that it happens from nothing, but it doesn't. I mean, creativity is the subconscious human process when our minds put bits and pieces of what we have with us together into new combinations that might prove useful somehow. And if you isolate yourself, and if you limit yourself, and if you limit the amount of impressions you can take in, naturally, the toolbox for creative combinations and new things to happen will be smaller. And I also felt that aside of the human side, you know, I really didn't want this to happen either. And another part of sort of the dilemma in how to come to terms with this is that chefs in general, including myself, we tend to kind of overestimate our importance. And that happens really easily, you know, especially when you hang out in crowds like this, where we kind of idolize each other, and it's a whole thing, you know, we go to conferences and there's like 400 people looking at you talking about, you know, whatever. And And it is like, if you put it in a bigger perspective, I mean, does the world really stop if you miss a single service in your restaurant? No, it doesn't. I mean, it's a restaurant. It's all it is. It might be very important to you. It's important for your livelihood. It's your business. It's your passion. But it's still a restaurant. And what happened at the same time at Faviken was that Karin and Jesper, who are the people that have worked the longest with me at Faviken, they were beginning to see, together with me, problems with the way we ran our business. We saw that it was just not going to be able to continue the way it was. Partly because we didn't want to, because we wanted another part of life as well, but also because it wasn't sustainable with the staff. It just wasn't. And the reason, like, when we really decided that we had to change is when we had this meeting and we sat down and we tried to visualize where we were going to be in 5 years. And it turned out that none of us, none of the 3 people that matter the most at Faviken, could see ourselves working at Faviken the way we did then, 5 years down the line. That's when we really sort of understood that we had to change. And it started from kind of selfish reasons, that we wanted to make change for ourselves to better our everyday life and our existence. But we very quickly realized that running a place like Faviken, I mean, it would be a terrible, terrible thing if you ran a profitable business where you exploit your team in order to make it better for yourself to the degree we wanted to do. So we kind of turned it around and decided that all of the changes we want to do, they have to apply for everyone. It needs to be the same premises. And what we really felt was that it was really unfair that we were being pushed out of the business that we love and that we were pretty good at after having trained many years, simply because some other people long before us had constructed a system that was broken and that we couldn't really affect in the way we wanted to. And when we started looking at what we wanted to do, we kind of boiled it down to 2 things. One is that at Faviken, no one should be indispensable. Not a single employee, including the key members of the team, should be indispensable. And this also includes me. And the second thing is that we want everyone that comes to work at Faviken every day to feel like they want to be there and not like they have to be there. And there's a really big difference there, between those things. For example, for me, I mean, I used to feel guilt for not being in the restaurant, thinking about the customers who'd come there to experience what I had designed as a restaurant. And Jesper and Karin, they used to feel guilt when they weren't in the restaurant towards me, because they felt that they didn't quite honor the commitments that we've done to each other. And then the rest of the team, they often felt guilt because, they knew that if they were sick or if they took a day off for vacation, someone else had to work double hard to make up for them not being there. And this is obviously not very healthy. And it sounds so kind of stupid when you talk about it like this, because it's so obvious. But I mean, this is the way most restaurants actually work. And to kind of figure this out, I mean, we started looking at different options. And we realized that we had to make really major changes. And the first option that comes up, when you start looking at this is that, okay, we'll limit our volume. And this is, for example, what Espen has done at Maemo. And it's the first thing that comes to mind when you start looking at how to limit your staff hours, because that's the most immediate thing that you can affect. And we felt quite quickly when we started sort of looking into this that was not the way for us to go. Sure, I mean, it would take care of the first problem with the long weekly hours. It would. If you go open, I'm open 4 days, and everyone works, one team, 4 days. It will take care of the excess hours in that sense. But it doesn't take care of the guilt part. Because if anything then, you have less income, meaning that you can have less staff, meaning that the system is more fragile than it was before. At least that's the way we saw it. And also, it doesn't take care of another major problem, which is the very long work days. If anything, it over-exaggerates the long work days because people feel that, well, now I have a 3-day or 4-day weekend, I might as well work an 18-hour shift. But the truth is that really interferes with how the rest of society functions. And there are very few people that can also function at the same level for 18 hours as they can in 8. And the third thing, which is not really tied to perhaps the human side or the practical function of a restaurant, is that if you have more people on your team, you also have more minds to tap into creatively. It can be more people feeding into the creative process. And I mean, there are more people on the craft level that can specialize themselves on a particular part of our craft, and thereby becoming experts on that. And in combination with the larger creative sort of capacity, you can make the restaurant experience better, more complex, and more accomplished. These are the kind of upsides with the larger team. So I quickly realized that I didn't want a smaller team and less volume. I wanted a bigger volume and a bigger team to work with. I mean, this sounds like we're making the restaurant huge, but Faviken is still a very small restaurant. And we started to sit down, me and Jesper and Karin, and decide to look at sort of what's our dream team? What is the perfect team for us? And we quite quickly realized that we had to go from the 12 employees we were back then to quite a lot more. And the final number was 37. So that's obviously a huge difference. And this was really what we needed to do if we wanted to continue working the same way we did with the menus we worked with, and sort of reduce staff hours to a sensible level, at the same time as making people not being indispensable. To essentially have at least 2 people who can do any given part of the operation of the restaurant business. And at first, this obviously seemed totally impossible. But we felt that at least we needed to, try, because that's what running a restaurant like Faviken is about. It's about trying to realize your dream. And this was now our dream. And we sat down and we started looking at the money side of things. And we saw that we had to, first of all, increase our seats from 16 to 24. And that felt okay. I mean, it's a 50% increase of our revenue there. And then we used to be closed for vacation, and we used to be closed for creative work, and we very quickly saw that this was inefficient from a financial standpoint, and we felt that we could integrate these things with the larger staff into the day-to-day running of the restaurant. So we did that as well. That's another 30% increase of our revenue. And this was not enough. We also had to increase our pricing from 175 euros to 300 euros, which is huge, obviously. So we saw that we needed to go from a budgeted 12 million krona turnover every year to 28 million krona turnover every year to make these changes and still retain a 10% net profit and still retain all of the other qualities that makes up Faviken, the quality of produce and the hardware and all of that stuff. And we just felt that if we didn't at least try, we would have to close the restaurant anyway. A couple of years down the line perhaps, but simply because the team would not last and we wouldn't want to continue working the way we used to work. So we just sort of went for it, thinking that it's better to try and fail than not try at all. And I prepared, people, we tend to kind of focus on the bad things that can happen as well, to over-exaggerate the worst-case scenario. And I sort of started preparing all of these sort of elaborate answers for the press and for the customers and whatnot, to justify what we were going to do. I mean, we were in the right. We wanted to make the restaurant a better place to work and still continue to do in good quality. So, we had the reason. But still, I was very worried about this, and also obviously worried that no one was going to come anymore because it was so expensive. And you know what the reaction was? None. Nothing happened. It was not a single journalist who called in and say, what the hell are you doing with your prices? It was not a single tweet, not a single Instagram post, not a single mention of us going overnight from 175 euros to 300. I don't think anyone even noticed it. Super weird. And people are still coming. This is now a few years ago. We took the decision 3 years ago, and we started implementing all of it 2 years ago. And it's kind of taken until now, until we're finally at the point where we're, reasonably satisfied with where we are. It's not perfect, definitely not. There's still things to do, but we've gotten quite far. And where we are now, we have our 37 staff, and they are scheduled 40 to 45 hours a week, and it depends on sort of which position they are, whether it's 40 or 45. We have a 50-hour roof per week, so there's no overtime over 50 hours ever. It's a very firm limit. We take our 5 weeks of vacation every year, of which 3 are always 3 consecutive weeks throughout the summer half of the year. We allow ourselves time to be ill and to get well and come back to work. And most importantly, I think, we try to create work-life balance in the sense that after a year at Faviken, you're supposed to have half of your days as a chef de partie in the kitchen, daytime, Monday to Friday, 8 to 5. And then the other half of your days, you work Tuesday to Saturday, and you work 1 o'clock to 11 o'clock. I mean, it doesn't work out all the time, but it works out almost all the time, and that's something that we're really, really proud of. And myself, I mean, I work 3 nights a week. I work 2 days a week. And then I do other things as well, like this, of course, so that I don't really count into it, but I also don't do things like this very often anymore. And I spend much more time with my family, which makes me a lot happier, which in its turn makes me a lot better at my job, at what I do at Faviken. At 33 years of age, I have a hobby. I garden. I garden a lot. It's almost an obsession, which tends to happen to me sometimes. And I mean, when I wake up in the morning now, I don't think about problems at work anymore, because I'm so confident in the 36 people aside of myself who work there, most of which have worked here for quite a long time now as well, and their capability of running the restaurant. So I think about like tomato seeds and manure and my family and reading the newspaper and whatnot. And then I come into work. If I work in the evening, I come in at 1 o'clock like everyone else. And I mean, I don't come into the restaurant anymore feeling like I have to be there. I come into the restaurant feeling like I really, really want to be there. And it's fantastic. And thank you.